Hello, I'm Jane Weakley. I'm a partner at Field Fish, and I work with parents and children where the children have serious injuries, and act for a particular client. I'm going to call her Sarah, and Sarah's 13. She has dystonic cerebral palsy, and this was caused at her birth when there was a shortage of oxygen and a delay in delivering her. I've got Debjani Roy here. She's a case manager with Brownbills, and Debjani's been helping us on the ground with family and with Sarah in implementing her future needs. And the breakdown for this family came, the lockdown for this family came at a difficult time because they were about to move into a more suitable rental property for Sarah. And Debjani, I think it was the actual day of the lockdown when the move couldn't take place.
Yes, you're quite right, Jane. The property needed some minor adaptations as recommended by her occupational therapist. They needed some handrails in the stairs, and more importantly, in the outdoor garden area there was some steps which needed handrails and fencing put up, but unfortunately it was on the day of the lockdown that the builder was supposed to go and survey the property to put up the adaptations, and that appointment was unfortunately cancelled due to the lockdown and the builders closing shop on that very day, which is really unfortunate because the family could have otherwise moved into the property, and there were quite a few plans that we had put in place to happen after the family had moved in the property to provide Sarah with carers for her during day and during night as well, because their current property is not suitable to accommodate carers. It's quite overcrowded, and so we had to adapt overnight and think of different ways in which we could support Sarah and her family, and to cope with the lockdown and putting a stop to their plans of moving into a more suitable property.
Well, I think you've done very well with the. You've done very well, I think, with maintaining the physiotherapy for Sarah, which I know has become even more important because she's not able to go to school and have as much movement that she would normally. So I think that's been very helpful to the family. And I think, can you explain how that's been working in practice?
Yes, of course. Basically, prior to the lockdown, Sarah was having weekly physiotherapy with a specialized pediatric physio, who she would go into her clinic and do an hour-long session working on her mobility. Sarah has got quite high mobility needs. She gets quite stiff. She's dystonic, and she uses a walker to walk with, and she's got balancing and coordination difficulties as well. And over the months prior to setting up the physiotherapy, her mobility had been gradually getting worse. But once the physiotherapy started, it really helped to improve her overall mobility, her balance, and her strength as well. But unfortunately, as soon as the lockdown happened, the clinic closed down. So then I contacted the physiotherapist, who kindly enough agreed to do remote sessions with Sarah. So it's done over Skype, where we set up some equipment for Sarah within her home. So we ordered a gym ball and gaiters and a few other equipment which would help Sarah carry out her physiotherapy program within the house. And we increased the physiotherapy input from once a week to twice a week, only because Sarah was spending most of her time within, at home, on a chair or in front of a computer, a lot more than what she would be normally doing. Normally she would be going to school, walking around with her walker, doing physiotherapy at school as well. So we tried to up her mobility and her input, and that has really helped because Sarah's mom has fed back to me that it has helped her in improving her lower limb strength, and she's not as stiff and she's not in as much pain. anymore. So I think that
And
that
I think
really
that
helped to sort
probably
of,
has helped with
you
her.
know, keep on top of it.
I think it's probably helped with her frustration levels as well, because I know Sarah is somebody who does get frustrated, and I think even more so
Yes.
she's now at home with her siblings as well, and I think that adds another stress level. So I think it's really nice to hear from Mum particularly that sort of input is very positive, and has been able to
Absolutely.
continue. But I know there are some things, Debjani, that haven't been able to happen. So, for example, we know that Sarah's been very much hoping for her electric wheelchair to be able to use around the house, and that was very much dependent on having the space in a property to do that. And obviously now the move hasn't taken place. That is something that unfortunately has to have been put on hold.
Yeah, some of the things obviously we cannot go ahead with, like I said, mainly because of the property and obviously Sarah's inability to go out as freely as she normally would have. So hopefully all that is in, it's on hold at the moment, but as soon as the lockdown pressures ease, we can go back to putting those in place. The other thing which we've had to stop is the occupational therapy input. What I did to sort of overcome part of that, obviously it's not the same as having an occupational therapy visit her, but we sought some advice from a sensory occupational therapist and ordered some sensory toys and games for Sarah in the house. So Sarah's got quite a lot of tightness in her and dystonia in her hands, and her fine motor skills are affected as a result. So we ordered some toys which would enable her to sort of, they're like squidgy toys and toys where she has to use her hands to place on different objects. They're like cause and effect toys where you press buttons and something else happens. We've also ordered some memory games for her at home because to keep her mind active while she's at home. So just trying to offer Sarah as many as sort of focused, productive activities that she can do while the family are in lockdown, and while they're trying to cope with all this. The other thing which I haven't actually mentioned to you yet, Jane, but I have contacted Sarah's music therapist, and because Sarah was accessing weekly music therapy for her, just sort of because she's non-verbal, to help her sort of verbalize and express her emotions, and sort of get rid of her frustrations, and that was working really well. So the music therapist has agreed to offer remote sessions, and we can look at setting that up hopefully in the future, in the coming weeks. We might have to get
That's
Sarah one musical instrument, so it could be drums, which I'm sure Mum will not be that glad about, but I think Sarah loves her drums, and then she can participate in a remote music therapy session, which I think would be really useful as well for her.
That's great. That's really good to hear, Debjani. We do appreciate what you're trying to do to find these workarounds for Sarah and her family. One other thing, Sarah does have cognitive retention. She's a bright little girl, hence her frustration. And I think that something that's been touched upon is her own concerns about the pandemic and what she understands about it, and the fact that if support workers are going to come and help her and her family, about the PPE and what they'll be wearing. And I just wondered whether you had much insight into how she's feeling about this.
Yes, that's actually a very good point. And it is true that Sarah has expressed concern about the coronavirus. Her mum said to me that the other day, I think she was watching BBC News. Mum was watching BBC News, and Sarah was in the room next door, but she overheard a snippet about people dying, and that has made her quite anxious, understandably. Obviously, what I've done is I've sent Mum a few videos which have been made for children and for people with learning difficulties, which explain in a very simple way what the coronavirus is, how it can spread, and what people are doing to sort of minimize the spread? Why are we staying at home? And it just explains that in a very simplistic way, but not not a scary way. So I quite find those videos quite useful for my daughter, who's 6 years old. So it explains quite nicely, and it's not daunting. It doesn't talk about dying, but it just says that people can get sick, but most people will get better, etc. And um, Sarah's mom said to me that she shared the videos with Sarah, and she found them a lot, had a more calming effect on her, and she was able to understand a bit more, why what's happening, is happening, because for a child it can be quite difficult to just understand it, let alone someone with cognitive difficulties. The other thing which we've
I
done
think
is mom has ordered. Yeah, sorry. Mom has ordered a mask for Sarah, and they're just going to wear it when they go out, for a walk in her wheelchair or something, because it's something which I guess all of us have to get used to eventually, to seeing people wearing PPE and masks.